Richard Turner.
Richard Turner.
And looking with both eyes, I couldn't see how he did it.
Richard Turner, he does things that nobody else in the world can do with cars. Nobody.
I don't call myself blind because I see things in ways that other people can't see.
He's in the Hall of Fame at the Magic Castle.
Don't let anyone tell you there's anything you can't do.
We're back for another episode, and I have some serious questions here. So this is a little different here. Richard, you've swam in some pretty dark waters in your life. Can you tell us about scarlet fever and what happened with that?
Yeah, it was 1963. My sister Lori and I, she was 3 years and 9 months younger than I was. She was 5, I was 9. And we both caught scarlet fever. And back then they didn't know really what to do with it. But I do remember, if I remember right, the whole school had to take some kind of antidote, and we had to take something else. And we were locked down for about 3 weeks, and I had blisters down my throat, blisters down my back. Anyway, after the scarlet fever, I'm back in my 4th grade class, and it was very strange. First I'm looking at my math book. It was math class. Wasn't a big fan of math class, all that much. So I'm looking at my math book. Now I'm looking back up at the chalkboard where my teacher, Mrs. Gaston, but we called her Mrs. Gasser because she smelled.
Oh no.
But Mrs. Gaston was writing down a math problem, fine. I looked back down, and then I looked back up, and the whole thing was a blur. It was almost like a stroke, you know. You know, something happened, and it caused something to happen, and like I said, all of a sudden it's a blur, and I go, what happened there? It's like she took this eraser and smeared everything. I looked back down at my book, and the numbers that were a minute before were clear are also fuzzed up.
Wow.
And I looked back up, and she's still writing on the board, but I couldn't make out heads or tails, and I raised my head and I said, Mrs. Gaston, for some reason I can't see the board, something happened. And she said, well, go to the nurse. And I got out of there and I thought, cool, I'm getting out of math class. But as I'm walking from the 4th grade building to the nurse's building, all of a sudden I'm noticing something's wrong. Everything was just solid, like a cartoon. You've heard me describe how I see at that point, like cartoons. Everything were just solid images. The details were gone. Like if there's a door, couldn't see the doorknob. You know, I'm just giving simple examples. So I'm going, well, something's not quite right here. I get to the nurse's office, and I told her something happened, and for some reason I'm having trouble seeing. So she positioned me back about 10 feet or so from, back then they had what was called an E chart. And you would tell which direction the E was facing. And it had different sizes of E's. And so she started at the bottom and she said, with your hand, just point which direction you think the E is facing. Okay, and so I'm sitting there looking like this, and of course, I couldn't see anything straight on, and because what happened was the macula, which is the center part of the eye, just dissolved, and the rest of it, almost instantly, went to 2400, twice as low as what was considered legally blind.
Wow!
So I'm sitting there, even trying to find her, and I noticed I looked to the side, I could see her, and I'm sitting there trying to see which directions he's pointing. I said, I can't see it, nurse. And so she moved up to the next level, and then a little softer, she says, can you see this now? And her softer voice kind of made me a little concerned, like this is kind of serious. Then she moved up. I could tell the third one's down. And of course the top, there were just 2 and they were huge. Then there were 3. And the 4th and 3rd ones, I was right. And she goes, okay, you need to have some tests done. And so my family started going to doctor after doctor after doctor. My knee, this is 1963, 64, and they did not have the sophistication as they did and do today.
So what did they say without the advanced tools that we have today? Were they able to say much other than?
Well, they tried glasses. It was not correctable. Some people get a nearsighted or foresighted. They could put glasses and that would correct it. In this particular case, it was not correctable.
Oh, so you couldn't even get glasses?
No, they tried it, but it didn't work. And so finally, I get to the point where they said he's going to have to go to a special school for the visually impaired. Back then, they called it visually handicapped. And I hated that word handicap, mind you, and I hated the word blind, and many of you have heard me say that many times. But it was called a VH room, visually handicapped. When that particular doctor told, it was just me and my mom at the time, told my mom that was the first and last time I ever remember her hugging me.
And she even said that she would never forgive you. And this is something out of your control. You know, this is not something you chose to do. So why would she say that?
I know. I was no taller than her chest.
Right.
So I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm never going to forgive you for that. I'm never going to forgive you. And I'm going, you're never going to forgive me for what? And I'm only a little kid. I don't even know what was going on. And as the years went on, I realized she was not going to forgive me for losing my sight, as if it was my fault. And then she started having an affair with a sailor and ran off with him.
And how did the desertion of your mom affect your sister?
My sister Lori, the same thing happened to her.
Yeah.
But because we were the two that got scarlet fever, and the same thing within a 60-second period of time. You know, she could see clearly. 60 seconds later, everything was a blur for her. Her vision wasn't as bad as mine, and my degeneration was, I was ahead of her. So she knew 2 years from now, whatever I was at this point, in 2 years, that's where she was going to be. So she was kind of following behind me, knowing what was coming up next. When our mother rejected us, I told her, just find a new mother. We had a wonderful lady named Mary Utley that was a good friend. I said, just
What a sad thing for a son to have to say.
for a brother to have to say.
Yeah, son, brother.
Son, brother. I know.
Find a new mother.
Find a new mother.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I told her. I said, just find a new mother and adopt that person as your mother. Don't let her take you down, and don't let her hurt you inside emotionally.
Richard, what happened to your brother David?
It was hard for him. Okay, he was like, well, how old was he when she left? He was about 7. He was 10 years old, and because all the attention was on me, because my sight was going south. My sister Lori, her sight was going south. My sister Deborah was cross-eyed, so she had to have a kind of a surgery to correct her situation, which was correctable. And my poor little brother David was totally ignored. He was just totally ignored. If you look at any of his pictures, growing up from ages 3 to 16, to 3, 4, 5, all in those single-digit years, he looks like he's possessed. Just 1,000-mile stare, just like he just looks like he's totally empty inside. And so he really had a lot of trouble. I mean, he was serving time at 10 years old. He would, and I would go in, and I was one of the people they allowed in as kind of a counselor, older brother. I'm 7 years older, and he started serving time at 10 years old, 11 years old. It was juvie, but he was in there for sometimes month, 2 months at a time, 3 months. Then eventually he was, he had a whole string of felonies, and he was so blatant. He got a truck. He wanted to tune it up. He would take his truck, park it right next to a matching truck, open up both hoods, and start rebuilding his truck with the parts from the other truck.
Wow. And
sometimes he'd be arrested, so he just didn't care.
Yeah.
And finally, he did some pretty bad crimes, and he was served an 18 years. He was sentenced for 18 years in hard federal prison, but he got out. While he was in prison, he became an electrician, and he got out in 9 years, and he totally turned around. When he got out, his halfway house person. I don't remember what they call her, but her name was Tia. And so she was responsible for him while he's staying in these apartments, while he's being transitioned back into society. She was, I'll just say, like a parole officer.
Right.
But that's not what she was, but that kind of gives you an idea. She was in charge of him, and my brother, I have to say, he was a charmer. He would charm ladies in weird ways. One, I'm getting off topic. He would get in a car with them and go zipping around the freeway 120 miles an hour and just have the girls falling all over him. He was a charmer in the strangest ways. Anyway, he charmed her, and they got married. They've had 3 wonderful kids, all now in college and on. And so my brother, my sister and I, we had a tough time. But I always say my brother had even a more difficult time, and because he was, it's one thing when you're loved or hated, but when you're totally ignored, the middle of the road, I think, is one of the worst things. And so he survived all that, and I am so proud of him. And like I said, he had a harder time, but now he's has a successful business. And real quickly, when he got out of prison, and here's an ironic little side bit, my sister gave him a electrical knife because he became an electrician. They come over and check him out. Oh, you're not allowed to have a knife. They threw him in for another 6 months.
Wow.
Because she gave him a little electrician's tool and had a little miniature knife on it, so he got 6 more months. But when he got out, what he would do is he would go to auctions where they would be retrofitting these schools, where they had stuff that was put in back in the 1940s, really high-end stuff. And he'd get it for pennies on the dollar. And then he'd go to businesses and says, how would you like me to put in some nice fixtures? And so he took that stuff he got for pennies and would put it in there. And he even bought himself one of those cherry pickers. It's what they would use to go up real high to. He got a cherry picker for like $2,200 because something broke on it, and the governments, they just throw stuff away. He had it fixed in one day.
Wow. So
he got a $40,000, whatever it was, dollar cherry picker for like $2,200.
Wow.
So he was able to go up real high and fix these things. And within the first month of getting out of prison, he's making $1,000 a week.
Wow.
So like I said, I am so proud of him, and he's just a delightful brother, and he's got a wonderful disposition, funny, and anyway, I'm just proud of my brother.
Richard, how did it feel getting shipped off to a special school for the visually impaired?
Yeah, that was tough. At 9 years old, started going south. When I was in 5th grade, they had no accommodations, so I couldn't do anything, which actually I kind of liked. The only thing I was able to do was art and spelling. Math and all that stuff. I couldn't read the books. That was the 6th grade is when I was shipped off to Carlton Hills in Santee, which was a whole city over, and so I had to take a bus, which I hated, instead of walking to school. The head of the VH department was a man I've mentioned in other times, Mr. Ed Bryan, wonderful guy, and he headed up the VH department and taught us all kinds of things. But it was hard because, here, think about it. I'm having to leave my friends, friends I grew up with, go a strange place, strange school, and I'm treated like I hate to use the word, kind of a freak.
How did the film Lord of the Flies affect you?
That was a movie, for some reason, I can't even to this day really understand the logic for showing this movie to 7, 8, 9-year-olds.
Right.
First time I saw it was in 2nd grade. We had to watch it again in 3rd grade and 4th grade. And the movie was about a group of kids, boys, about my age at that time, probably, 8 to 10 years old, somewhere 8 to 12 years old, something in that time frame. And they were stranded on an island, and they started dividing up into tribes, sections. Right. The stronger ones would start taking charge, and basically they became savages. And there was one kid in there named Piggy. Now he was the one they picked on because he was chubby, had glasses, and had asthma, okay? And they wanted his glasses because they could use that to make a fire. So they would steal his glasses. Without his glasses, he couldn't hardly see. I kind of identified with Piggy, except for I was skinny, blind, and had asthma. And they called me Mr. Magoo. And with Piggy, towards the end of the film, they basically pushed him off a cliff and killed him.
Wow.
And so that always terrified me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the teachers used that to prove the theory of evolution.
And what did that make you think when they would say that?
Well, it was totally, that's a good question. They would say, this proves the idea of evolution, that we evolved from monkeys to people, and if we are left to our own devices, we'll revert from people back into monkeys. And I was probably in second grade during lunch, and I'm peeling an orange. And I thought to myself, why did the orange decide to slice itself inside of its peel? Why did the orange decide to slice itself inside of its peel? I thought that is a mystery.
How about the TV show Lost in Space? Because that was another one that had an effect on you.
Yeah, because my thing was becoming a coward. I was afraid of becoming a coward because I was either the smallest or second smallest in my class. And there was this character in Lost in Space called Dr. Smith, I think played by Jonathan Winters, I can't remember the actor's name. And then there was the 10-year-old kid, Billy Mummy, William Robinson, played by Billy Mummy. And here's the little kid, here comes this paper mache monster. It looks, it's goofy as all get out. You know, they didn't, but as a 10-year-old, you know,
They did their best back then.
But Dr. Smith, he's hiding, cowering behind a rock, while little Will Robinson, he comes and saves the day. And I was afraid of turning out like Dr. Smith, the guy hiding behind the rock.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the Tarzan movies.
Right.
You know, the Tarzan movies. You know, there was almost every one. There's a scene where a tree falls between two cliffs, right? And the whole group, the hero said, "Follow me, and whatever you do, don't look down." And so they're all running across, and there was always the coward that would stop and look down and fall, and fall to their death.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And I was always afraid I was going to be that dumb coward that would look down and fall to their death.
Well, this makes sense with all your crazy antics later. I mean,
that's really, that was
really
actually,
goes back to there where you had that fear, and so you're always facing your fear doing these things.
You're exactly right. That's what kind of triggered my subconscious into overcompensating.
Right.
So I started doing all these crazy things, and that was kind of the impetus that instilled in my subconscious, whatever you want to call it, you know, the fear of this. So I really over tilted the other direction and just kind of went, as many people would say, overboard.
And you did have some things that you would watch actually happen, because like Piggy, you were bullied as a kid. And can you tell us about Reuben and the suitcases?
That's what I was.
Or your briefcases.
Yeah, I was mentioning that a little while ago. Yeah, they'd come in, flick our latches, and the homework would fall out, spread all over the place, and they just stood around laughing at us, and it was very embarrassing. And when we were walking, I would help him get around because his vision was worse than mine at that time, even though when we were filming Delt, they went and interviewed him for Delt, and his vision never changed, where mine continued to, where I had no vision left, no actual input ability. So I would kind of help him negotiate around, and the other kids would call us names. I won't say it because it's impolite what they'd call us. You know, they would just call us bad names. I'll just leave it at that.
Richard, what happened at the boys' club competition?
Some of you have heard the abbreviated version of this story. When I was a kid, at 5 years old, I could paint and draw beyond my years. We had finger painting class, 5 years old, kindergarten. And the other kids are just smearing finger paint all over the place. And I have a photographic memory, and I remember a scene from a National Geographic of this underwater scene of the landscape, coral, fish, angelfish. So I did this whole thing of a shark in the middle, angelfish, a jellyfish, and the coral coming up and some other fish around. And Mrs. Barnes, my kindergarten teacher, says to her assistant, "Come here and look what Ricky did." And they were just shocked. And to me, it was just fun. But
Right.
And so first grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, I was known as the best artist in the class. And then, of course, the vision went south. At 9 years old, and I'm now 10 years old, I think. 10 years old, I'm at a statewide boys club art competition, full state of California. It took place in Ocean Beach. And I entered the art competition. And now I was painting three vases on a table with proper shadowing, the lights coming down this angle so it's bright, and then it would show the shadows and the depth and so on. But because by then I had to have my nose like right on it. I was literally painting the tip of my nose half the time because I'd get it on the canvas. And I did this beautiful painting of, like I said, three vases on a table, and it won first place. Okay? And then there were these other two boys that did not like that the blind kid beat them out. And so they started teasing me, and they would, flip the bird in front of my face and go, "Hey, Magoo, how many fingers am I holding up?" They always like to call me Magoo, Mr. Magoo, the nearsighted cartoon character, just voiced by Jim Backus way back in the 60s. And while I was distracted here, the other bully picked a wallet out of my pocket, and he'd hold it in front of me and go and say, "Hey, Magoo, got any money? You want to buy us a hot dog?" And I would grab for my wallet. I could kind of see it was right in front of me. I'd grab for it, and as soon as I did it, he would heave it right over my head where his friend was behind me. He would catch it, and I'd turn around, I'd go for a grab it again. He'd throw it back over to the other friend like a game of pickle when you're playing baseball, between the second base and third base, back and forth and back and forth. I'm trying to get it, and I couldn't get it. And then and of course I'm starting to feel embarrassed. And now all these other kids are watching and starting to gather around, and they're cheering the bullies on while laughing at me. And now I'm even more embarrassed. In fact, I'm humiliated. And and I'm just 10 years old, and I was kind of shy to begin with. And of course, the fact that I was the visually impaired person even made it more embarrassing. So they're going back and forth. Everyone laughs, get him. And then finally, the one kid trips me, and he kicks me in the rib. He kicked me twice, but he kicked me right in the ribs. And I hate to say it, I started crying. And they took my wallet and they said, "Thanks for the hot dog, blind boy." And they ran off with my money. And at that time, it was $3. $3 for me was a mass fortune. I had to do a lot of my little card tricks and my sucker trick, my circus trick to have made that massive fortune. Because before I got up to $2.65, and I kept that money so my mom didn't find it, in a eucalyptus tree that had a flattened off place up in the tree, and that's where I'd hide my gambling stash.
Like a squirrel, like a squirrel.
Just like a squirrel, just like that, all gone.
Wow. Richard, 2 words: magnifying glass.
Yeah, I know this is embarrassing, and not embarrassing, it's just, it's embarrassing. Because I was self-pity, I was feeling sorry for myself, so I was just angry at the fact that my eyes, I was cursing my eyes. My mother reject, can't paint anymore, can't draw anymore. And so I was just pissed off at my eyes. So I remembered what my teacher said, never look at the sun. It's bad for you. So what did I do? I had this magnifying glass. It was about this big. When I first started losing my sight, they gave me that to see if it could help me read. So I had this big giant magnifying glass. Not a little one, but the big one is about, of course I was a kid at that time, but he was about that big of a circle with the handle. So I took that magnifying glass, went outside, and I would stare at the sun, trying to literally burn the worthless eyes out of my head. And for the next probably 3 years, from I'd say 13 to 16, I was rebellious, and I would curse God. I say, why does it have to be my eyes? Because even the deaf people could see the bad guys coming. I was afraid that I wouldn't know when the bad guy was coming after me. I had this plastic sword that I made in workshop, and I'd always have that with me. And then I would think about driving. I'm never going to be able to drive. And I thought, what girl would ever want to be with a guy that can't drive? So I was feeling sorry for myself, rebellious, and that's when I did a lot of things I really shouldn't have done.
As Jim Blower said, in doubt.
Did things you really should not have done, but those were different things than these things.
Richard, there were some sad tragedies with the rest of your family, and would you want to share some of those?
Yeah. During this same time, not only am I losing my vision, my uncle, my aunt, her house catches on fire right before Christmas, and their house burns to the ground. And 4 of my cousins and my uncle, they were burned alive. And that just terrified me. The thought of having my body cooked. And I remember the incinerator, because back in those days in our elementary school, we had an incinerator on the school grounds that the janitor would take all the trash and put it in there and incinerate stuff. And to me, being in a house that's on fire made me think of being put in that incinerator and cooked. It just terrified me. And then my same time period, of course, not my grandfather on my dad's side, he was killed years before because they were in the mountains of Tennessee. He was coming in on his wagon pulled by his horses, and his wagon flipped over and crushed him. So he was crushed to death.
Wow.
And my grandma remarries, and we went out to visit him, probably I think 67 or 68. And my dad's mom, she was a tough cookie. And they bought a new house, her new husband, they bought a new house. And that house cost $100.
Wow.
$100. Of course, it was a piece of junk. And I remember watching her. She's sitting there cutting doors, making her own doors to put up on this shell of a house.
That sounds like a special kind of talent there.
Well, oh yeah, she had special talent, and they just bred them strong there in Tennessee. So they're building on this house, and the house that I grew up in, which was a dump, and it was such a dump, it was literally, let's see, it was 27 feet wide by about, let me calculate that, 17 foot wide, 27 feet wide, by about 20 foot wide. That's how big the house was. Not bigger than not even as big as the living room of our house that I live in now. On top of a ditch that was 6 foot into the ground, the basement. That's where I lived, was in that ditch, that basement. And it cost $6,000 back in the 50s, and it was torn down and condemned. So the idea of buying a house for $100, I thought, wow, that's a darn good price. So
and your grandmother was murdered.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, but you know what? Well, the cool thing about my grandma, and I think it's where my dad got his talent, she was very industrious. They were tobacco farmers, but that's not where what she was known for. They'd take the corn husks, you know how they have the husk that goes off the corn of a corn cob? She'd take those husks, and she would make purses and lampshades and rugs and hats, everything you can imagine. She would weave them together into the perfect shape of a purse, and she was a master embroiderer. She had embroidered flowers and all this stuff on her stuff. And she actually had, I remember in her particular room, just row after row of all this wonderful stuff that she had created out of corn shucks. And she was actually featured in a 1962 issue of Time magazine with all her creations, and I have that actual article framed in my house on one of the walls. But yeah, she was very talented, and I think my dad got some of his artistic talent from her. And then I think I got some of mine from him. So it's kind of passed down in that area.
And tell us about what happened to her with the murder.
Shortly after we had visited them, her new husband, obviously there was something wrong with the guy. They're working on this house I was telling you about, and he's working on the roof. He has a roofing knife with him. And then she comes home. So this was premeditated. He planned on doing this. As soon as she came home, he pulled out his shotgun. He's going to blow her away.
Wow.
But my grandma, Southern hard stock, she ran in there, grabbed that shotgun, and she wrestled it away from him.
Wow.
Okay, but then he pulled out that roofing knife, he jabbed it in her heart, pulled it out, and then cut off her head. And my Aunt Maybelle said the only thing was left was just a piece of skin. He pretty much decapitated her. Then he took that shotgun and blew himself away.
Wow.
So that was sad.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Growing up, your sister Deborah was your biggest fan.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, same thing. She was people actually thought we were boyfriend and girlfriend because usually siblings fight, but we were only a year apart in age. So she was really my best friend. We'd go do things together, and she was walking home from school and was hit and killed by a 21-year-old drunk driver. And the guy got a year and a day for killing my sister.
Wow. So I'm hearing from you that it was pity and fear of becoming a coward that put you on a destructive path.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. It just made me, like I said, I rebelled against my family, I rebelled against my school,
Right.
I rebelled against my friends, and I started doing all these destructive things. We'll just cut to the chase. My partner, I had a dealing partner named Doug Ferguson, who ended up dying. I think I mentioned I have like over 24 people that have died from drugs, accident, all these things related to drugs. And he ended up dying at 21 of hepatitis from using dirty needles from shooting up heroin. And I actually went to his funeral. Now I had been clean for 16, 17, about 5 years. I had changed my ways. And I remember going to his funeral. He actually looked better in death than he did in life, which is really sad. But anyway, he tried to kill me. He thought I had cheated him, and I had not. I don't even know where he got the idea that he thought I had cheated him. But he thought I had cheated him, and I have to say that I would deal cards to trick people out of their drugs or drug money. Okay? So he and a guy named BT, Big T, they decided to do a number on me. And Big T says, "Look at this giant eyedropper." Because back then, they didn't give us free needles like they do today. Hey, heroin addicts, come over here, free needles, all over San Francisco, everywhere, free needles. We had to make our own back then. And the way we did is we'd take an eyedropper, eyedropper. Then those bowls of fruit, the plastic fruit, oranges, everything, but the grapes were rubber. So we'd take a rubber grape and we'd twist it on the back end of an eyedropper, and we take thread and tie it on. But he found this eyedropper that was bigger than a normal eyedropper. And he was showing off, "Little Rick, look how big this eyedropper is." Had the rubber on the back, and then you'd find we called it a point, a needle. That was the hardest part, is finding your needle. And then you would take a little thread to secure it on there. And he bent a spoon, and he said, "I'm making a special brew for you." And he mixed in, instead of water as your base, he put in rum, took some coffee, some cocoa, and then heroin, mixed it all up, cooked it up, and they grabbed a hold of me. They tied me off. They took a belt and they put it around my arm to tie me off and then to make my veins pop out. And Doug is holding me down while BT is sticking the needle in me, or one way or the other. I can't remember which way it was. Anyway, they shot me up with that stuff, and I instantly started going into convulsions.
Yeah.
My body, I'm literally, I'm gasping for air. When that heroin cocktail hit my heart, I'm gasping for air. My body literally started bouncing on the floor like a worm on a hot plate. I was just bouncing on the floor, gasping for air. And at that moment, BT's girlfriend came home, and she's pounding on the door. "Hey, T, let me in, let me in." And he goes, "She can't see this, get him out of here." So he and Doug, they grabbed me by my ankles. They literally dragged me across the apartment. We're in an apartment to the back bedroom where they opened up the window, hefted me up, and threw me out the window.
Wow.
And I crashed down to the floor, to the concrete below, and they just left me there to die.
Wow.
Okay, I'm half conscious, and of course, hitting concrete floor after being thrown out a window didn't feel very good either. Fortunately, I was only half conscious. When I worked my way to the laundry room, and I'm leaning up against a washing machine, and this guy comes up to me, don't know who it is, and he just says, "Eat." And he handed me one of those little fold-out things of like from a fast food place. It had a burger and a drink in it. He said, "Eat." So I ate it, and her apartment wasn't very far from Wales Park. So now I worked my way to Wales Park, and I realized I need to change my ways or I'm going to die. And I went up to these people and I asked if they'd like to buy some drugs. They said they had something better. And they told me that we're not here by accident, that we're here by design. And that made me reflect back to when I was 7 years old, thinking about why did the orange decide to slice itself inside its peel? It didn't. There was an engineer behind the design of that orange, and there was an engineer behind the designing of us. And that's when my life changed.
And I think that is a great way to end this episode of Shark Tales.
I think so too. Until next time.
Until next time.
Dealing out.
No matter what hand someone's dealt in life, don't let anyone tell you, first of all, you can't play or something's impossible. I would say take possible out of impossible. When I first started losing my sight, I was really mad, but the loss of vision turned out to be a blessing and one of my greatest assets. You know, if we defeat adversity with honor and integrity, we can turn adversity into an asset, and that can lead to prosperity.
Play the cards you're dealt. I think that's a very inspirational message to anybody.
Now, when my vision started going south, I was blessed in two ways. One was with an enhanced sense of touch, and the other was the ability to see without sight.